So, I'm on the TED stage because apparently I'm successful. I'm lucky. I get to help organizations connect better in the workplace to drive innovation and growth, and I get to tell stories for a living. But there's one story I've never shared until now. Think about all of your connections for a minute. Of all of the people you're linked to on Facebook, your iPhone, Twitter, who is the most important connection to you? Your mentor, your partner, colleagues? What do you do if you can't make a connection to the most important person to you? I didn't know what to do. Even with all my tools and frameworks, I was lost. Because the most important connection to me was also the toughest. It was my mother. As my career success grew externally, my mother's mental health severely declined. She became very ill, and my response was to try to fix it with books, medicine, and doctors. It only seemed to drive us further apart. She didn't leave the house for over 2 years. There was a time when I couldn't reach her by phone. Even with all my measures of success around connections, I felt so helpless. I cried daily about the pain of not being able to connect with my mother, grieving for the loss of a parent who was still alive. And I also felt like a total loser, a connection expert externally who couldn't even connect with my own mother. Last year, my mother turned 60, and I was batting around the typical ideas for a gift, a book, maybe some flowers. And it was in that moment of total helplessness that I just asked myself, when have I felt truly connected to my mom? And I remembered a moment in my childhood. I was about 8 years old, and we were painting together. It was the happiest I remembered her, the canvas and the paint, both a buffer and outlet for our emotions. And so I just decided to buy her and send her a painting set. And without expectations at all, my mother started painting. And she started to send me shots by text message of her work. She painted this first one, an eye. Now, what do you see when you look at this painting? An eye. Let me tell you what I see. I see my mother saying, I see you. Do you see me? She also painted this one on my birthday of the two of us. When you look at this painting, what do you see? Two women side by side. I see my mother and I connected together. The painting set was the first thing that actually gave us a way to connect without words in a way that nothing else could. We rekindled our relationship together. The painting set helped my mother escape her own depression and allowed us to deepen our relationship. And it was through that journey with my mother that I began to ask myself about my own search for real connection. As my mother rekindled her love for art, I asked myself, what were the sources of connection that I had lost from my past? I asked myself that question not only personally, but also professionally. I had been training the world to be more innovative and connected in the workplace, often bringing new tools and best practices and use case studies. But I realized that I had been asking professionally, how can we be smarter with our connections in our digital world? And through my mother, I realized that I needed to ask, how can we be wiser with our connections? I needed to move from intelligence to wisdom. Because without wisdom, intelligence isn't enough. I needed to connect past my own fears, but in my professional life, I asked myself, how could I unlock the wisdom of others? In our working world today, we have a massive disease of disconnection in the workplace today, an inhibition of often our most creative selves. We follow the same routines, the cubicle chairs, the daily coffee run, the weekly lunch interaction. And so in that journey, I began to ask myself first, how could I spark wiser connections, not only personally, but professionally? And I had to ask myself first, what were the sources of connection that I had lost from my past? Who here has heard of Bhangra? Raise your hand if you've heard of Bhangra. Let's hear some Bhangra music for a second. Who here has danced Bhangra? Raise your hand if you've danced Bhangra. You might remember this. Show us a little bit if you do. It's a traditional Indian dance, heavy on rhythm and energy, as you can hear it. The drum beat gets me every time. I started doing Bhangra, Indian Bhangra, when I was a child. My mother used to take me to Indian movies as a kid. We grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I used to love just the energy and rhythm of what Bhangra really created. And it was when I was reminded of that journey around loving Bhangra that I remembered this moment. 150 people clapped and whistled, whooped and hollered, clearly pleased with the dance performance. 7-year-old me was the happiest I'd ever been. I had just performed Indian Bhangra at my local school with my first grade classmates. I remember it like yesterday. I had gotten the VHS tapes and rewinded and practiced the dance day in, day out. Then I taught my first grade classmates how to do the dance. And I remembered in that moment, from the rehearsal to the final event, it was my first real experience of connection with wisdom. I think about that moment a lot because it allowed me to be curious in new ways about my culture and history, courageous to take risks, and also to engage my community. I asked myself, where did I come from? And ultimately, where was I going? And I unlocked a powerful source of energy within myself. So fast forward 25 years later, as I began actually to rekindle my love for Bhangra, I went back to dance class and performed it at family weddings. I really began to think about the professional world that I had been living in and the work that I had done around connection. And that's when I discovered the solution that made me better think, act, and work with not only smarter connections, but wiser connections. I thought about how Bhangra could help us better connect and innovate at work. So during my executive sessions and workplace meetings, I started asking my clients to dance with me on stage. The equalizing nature of the movement completely engaged audiences. Silent contributors began to engage in rooms where they never spoke. It dissolved the traditional hierarchies and silos, the power structures, the loyalty structures in the workplace. And it was just about getting up, whether it was the partner or the intern, it was about getting up and putting it all out there. We often talk about the metaphor of dance in the workplace, citing the discipline of dance as a strategic process or a ritual form of connection. We've heard about the salsa, the step-by-step routine, helping people move in order, or the tango, the total absorption of the dancers in the dance. But what I realized from my own place is what we needed was to dance and use Bhangra in the workplace. I saw that the truest expression of Bhangra showed that our bodies never lie. They actually reach for words that don't exist and allow us to connect without words in entirely new ways. And I also realized that for me, it was about Bhangra dance, but for those in the room, it was about any type of connection that they had. It could be walking meetings during the day, or taking your team to an improv or cooking class, or hosting a new ideation competition or a hackathon to crowdsource ideas from those unexpected or unlikely sources around you. When's the last time you felt fully creative, engaged, and brave as an adult? That's what you want to feel at work. And that's what connection with wisdom is all about. We have to move in different rhythms, not the same old, to connect in new environments. Move from our typical 9:05 to 9:10 coffee routine, and maybe go to 3 new cafes every single week and bring one different person. Maybe your friend, but maybe your admin assistant, maybe your customer, maybe a new hire. When we connect in entirely new ways, it gives us the curiosity to ask new questions and the courage to take new risks. Innovation happens every day in secret, in silos, in cubicles. And we have to move in different rhythms. We have to connect with our deepest selves and bring that to work so we can inspire and solve problems in entirely new ways. The holiday season's coming up. What's the most important connection most people crave during the holidays? Wi-Fi. We are the most disconnected, plugged out, and tuned out with our closest relatives. This year, I'm going home for the holidays and seeing my mother after a few years. And you better believe we'll be Bhangra dancing. So where did I learn my greatest lesson about connection? Not from my books or my research or years of experience, but from my mother. And what does this have to do with the world of business and work in our lives? Well, connection today is often used to describe large quantity of networks and interactions, but that's just a high level and superficial. It's about tapping into our most vital emotional and creative spirits so we can evolve, connect with what is from our past, but evolve it, take the necessary twists and turns to grow into the future. As I learned and experienced my own story of connection, the deepest lesson that I learned is that our greatest sources of connection are where we least expect it, from tapping the wisdom of those unlikely sources of knowledge that are next to us, nearby, or even far away that we can connect to today. How could we leave this room feeling a bit more connected in a new, fun way? I could tell you how, or I could show you. So please join me in standing up right now with your arms up in the air. Let's get some music. We'll play the music. So hands up, and we're going to go with our shoulders down like this. Let's get the music loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, to the side.